All right, let's say our La'asok B'divrei Torah blessing together. Baruch atah Adonai
Adonai,
Eloheinu melech
Melech
haolam
Haolam,
asher
Asher
kitanu
Shanu
b'mitzvotav
B'Mitzvotav
v'tzivanu la'asok B'divrei
B'divrei
Torah.
Torah.
Praise to you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who has made us holy with your commandments and command us to busy ourselves with the words of Torah. So, we are still doing Pirkei Avot chapter 4, and it's been a month for presumably all of us at least. Perhaps you've been studying it in the meantime. It is in the Siddur after the Shabbat Mincha, Shabbat afternoon service, if you ever decide that you want to go investigating it during services. So we are going to recap as a refresher because sometimes the juxtaposition and the order makes a difference, and being reminded of what else is in this chapter can be useful. So we start with Ben Zoma, who said, "Who is wise? One who learns from everybody. Who is mighty? One who subdues their evil inclination. Who is rich? One who is happy with what they have. And who is honored? One who honors others." Ben Azai says, "Whether you think it's important or you don't think it's important, you should probably do it if it's a good idea, because doing the right thing leads to doing the right thing, and doing the wrong thing leads to doing the wrong thing, so you should do the right thing." Ben Azai also said, "Everybody has their moment, and everything has its moment. So don't discriminate or despise anybody or underrate the importance of anything, because you never know when it's going to have its moment." Rabbi Levitas from Yavna said, "Don't be full of yourself because you're not getting out of life alive." Rabbi Yochanan ben Barokas said, "If you think you're getting away with something in secret, you probably aren't, because doing the wrong thing is still the wrong thing, and people will find out eventually." And that was before they had cell phones to record things secretly. Rabbi Ishmael, not the famous Rabbi Ishmael ben Elisha, said, "If you learn in order to teach, you'll get this chance to study and to teach. And if you learn in order to do, you get this chance to learn and to teach and to do." Rabbi Tzadok said that you should learn Torah and Jewish things because it's good, not because you want to make yourself important. If that happens to be the case as a byproduct, so be it. Rabbi Yossi said, "If you honor the Torah, then you'll be honored by others because they'll think you have your priorities straight. And if you dishonor the Torah, then others are not going to think so highly of you." Rabbi Ishmael, still not the famous Rabbi Ishmael, said, "If you refrain from judgment or possibly from judging or being a judge, then you avoid enmity, robbery, and false swearing. But if you treat the judicial process lightly, either as a judge or as someone who's being judged, then you're foolish, wicked, and arrogant." Let's see, who was this? Rabbi Ishmael. Rabbi Ishmael also said, speaking of judging, that when possible, you should make decisions in a group of 3, and that since by default you will be the minority, you should not impose your views on others. Maybe try to convince them, but not say you must accept my position because you are the minority. Rabbi Jonathan said that if life is not going so well for you, but you still have a good sense of what is important, for instance, studying Torah, then when things are going well for you, you will still have your priorities straight. But if you can't make time to do the important things, even when things are not going so well for you, then even when things are going well for you, then when they are not going so well for you, you are even less likely to make time for the important things. So try to have for your priorities straight. Rabbi Meir said, "You should have both Torah and business, Again, as we saw before, be of a humble spirit before all people. And like we saw in the previous one, if you don't have a good sense of priorities, then it'll be very easy for lots of people to distract you. But if you have busied yourself in studying Jewish matters, then there's much reward that you will get from it, whether it be the reward of discovering things or the reward of the intellectual exercise or the reward of learning together with others and having social time, either in person or not. So Rabbi Meir would approve of what we are doing. All right, Rabbi Eliezer ben Jacob said, if you do something right, if you make a good choice, then you get an advocate. And if you make a bad choice, you get an accuser. And repentance and good deeds will mitigate punishments that might come to you. So try to get as many character witnesses for yourself as you can. Rabbi Yochanan Hassandlar, who was a sandal maker, said that every assembly which is for the sake of heaven and for the purpose of serving God will in the end endure, either because they'll keep going or because they'll be remembered well. And every gathering which is not for the sake of heaven will not endure in the end, one in some way or another. Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua, the son of Shemua, said, the dignity of your student should be as dear to you as your own, and the dignity of your colleague should be as your reverence for your teacher, which presumably should be high, and the reverence for your teacher should be as your reverence for heaven. So treat everybody nicely. Rabbi Judah said, be careful and study, because if you make a mistake in your study and then you teach something wrong, people will think that you did that on purpose. And either way, it won't look good for you. Rabbi Shimon, as in Shimon Bar Yochai, said, there are three crowns, the crown of Torah, the crown of priesthood, and the crown of royalty. But the crown of a good name is superior to all of them. Reputation, 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 as Shakespeare said. Rabbi Nehorai said, go to where Jewish study is happening and don't assume that it will come to you. As in, you have to at least click on the Zoom link. Because talking about Jewish things with other people will help you have a better understanding of it. I know for myself that I have a deeper understanding of the things that we have studied because I have studied them with all of you. Rabbi Yanai said that we can't really explain why good things seem to happen to bad people and bad things seem to happen to good people. You'll have to ask God later. Rabbi Matya ben Harash said that you should be the first to extend greetings to every person, and you should be a tail to lions rather than a head to foxes. So keep good company, even if you are lower on the pecking order. Rabbi Jacob said, this world is like a vestibule before the world to come. Prepare yourself in the vestibule so that you may enter the banqueting hall, because once you're dead, there's not much more you can do to affect how people remember you or whatever else happens after you die. Rabbi Jacob also said that more precious is 1 hour in repentance and good deeds in this world than all the life in the world to come, and more precious is 1 hour of the tranquility of the world to come than all of the life in this world. So it's kind of a win-win situation. Wherever you are, it's probably going to be good. Just try to take advantage of it, particularly while you're alive. Last month, we looked at what Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar said. Do not try to appease your friend during their hour of anger, nor comfort them at the hour while their dead still lies before them, nor question them at the hour of their vow, nor strive to see them in the hour of their disgrace. So that brings us to what Shmuel HaKatan said. Gary, would you read this text, please?
Or there. If your enemy falls, do not exult. If they trip, let your heart not rejoice, lest the Lord see it and be displeased and avert the divine wrath from them. Proverbs 24:17.
Okay, and our biography, please.
Samuel the Younger, or possibly Samuel the Little, meaning the humble, lived at Yavne, 80 to 110 CE. During the time of the Great Assembly, sometime pre-165 BCE, they came up with the 18 blessings that make up the weekday Amidah. These were put in order by Rabbi Shimon, oh goodness,
Hapakuli
during the time of Rabban Gamliel the First. During the time of Samuel the Younger, there were many informers among the Jews who would report back to the Romans. The rabbis found it necessary to create a blessing in weekly Amidah, asking God to frustrate the hopes of those who malign the Jews. Rabban Gamliel II asked if any of the rabbis felt up to creating this blessing, and Samuel the Younger took it on. Although there are now 19 blessings in the weekday Amidah, it still retains the name, the Shemona my eyes. Esrei, meaning the 18.
Okay, a little bit more.
All right. Deciding whether a year should be a leap year used to be an invitation-only affair until the calendar was standardized by Hillel II in 359 CE. Once Rabbi Gamliel II invited 7 rabbis to help figure this out, but 8 showed up. Samuel the Younger, who had actually been invited, claimed that he had come only to learn and not to participate in order to spare the actual uninvited rabbi from embarrassment.
All right, thank you. So, how are these sayings relevant to our lives today?
Can I share a point of information from the my sort of teacher, a little bit older than I am, Gordon Tucker, Rabbi Gordon Tucker, who was at the seminary while I was a student there.
Sure.
He's pointing out that this particular thing in Pirkei Avot is actually Proverbs 24 verses 17 and 18.
Okay, thank you.
I thought that was pretty interesting.
Great. All right, so how is this relevant to our lives today?
Well, can I ask Cantor Schwartz, so this came after the Proverbs?
Oh, much after the book of Proverbs was written. Yes. Centuries later.
Okay, thank you.
David, can you explain what he just read? I don't understand.
Sure. So you want me to explain the biography pieces? Okay.
No, not the biography piece, but
the thing that
Yeah, like the Pirkei Avot paragraph, not the biography.
So
Does
you're
that make sense?
asking me to explain the text from Pirkei Avot itself?
Yes, please.
Sure. So this guy, Shmuel HaKatan, or Samuel the Younger, is quoting from the book of Proverbs, wholesale, and he is saying that if your enemy, if something goes wrong, doesn't go so well for your enemy, don't be happy about it, because God might see that you are, I guess, have bad sportsmanship, but usually in higher stakes than a game, and not be happy about that, and then things might go badly for you. So this assumes a world in which God is in control of everything.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm talking about the one where it said that the Jews had to report to the Romans.
Oh yes, that. So that's biography. So this is saying that during the time of the Roman occupation in the land of Israel, the Romans had put in rules about what Jews could and couldn't do during services, because they were trying to decrease the amount of Judaism that the Jews were doing in the hopes that this would weaken their morale, I guess, and their identity. For instance, the Romans made a rule that the Jews couldn't say the Shema during services. And the Jews said, fine, we won't, because you've got better weapons than us. And they snuck it into other places in the service. Like when we take out the Torah, we say the Shema. And in the Musaf Kedusha, we say the Shema. And it's even tucked into a section called Tachanun, in a prayer called Shomer Yisrael, where it's broken up in between the first and the second verse. And in all these places when we say the Shema, also in Pirkei Zimra, actually, at the beginning of the service, we don't cover our eyes. And the reason we don't cover our eyes in these other places is because that would give it away to the Romans that we're saying the Shema, when they told us not to. So there were Jews who decided to be collaborators with the Romans and inform on what other Jews were doing to the Romans, looking for personal gain. And one way of trying to hamper their activities was to appeal to God. And so to do that, the rabbis created another blessing in the Amidah, which already had 18 blessings and was known as the Shmona Esrei, the 18. But they added this extra blessing to try to ask God to frustrate the designs of those who would be informing against them. It's the V'lo Malshinim blessing.
I was going to ask.
And this guy, Samuel the Younger, Shmuel HaKatan, is the one who wrote it. So it's interesting. Not only do I bring this here because there aren't that many biographical details about him, and this is one that is there, but also this guy was known as a humble guy, as we saw from the other incident in his life where he had been invited, but he claimed he had not been invited to something so as not to embarrass the person who showed up without an invitation. And so because he was humble, he was the one who was able to write this prayer from the appropriate spirit of asking God to frustrate the designs of those against us. So when he got to submit his words of wisdom for this book of quotations that we now know as Pirkei Avot, he chose to not even give his own thing. Like pretty much everybody else has something that they came up with. This guy just quotes from the Bible. And his quote from the Bible is from Proverbs, where it says, if your enemy falls, do not exult. If they trip, let your heart not rejoice, lest the Lord see and be displeased and avert the divine wrath from them. Does that help explain?
Yes.
Great.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
David?
Yeah.
That's reminiscent to me of Schmote. Is that where you're going with? Is that where you think it came from, or do you think it came from somewhere else? The enemies not rejoicing in their enemies' failures.
Um,
The Reed Seed division. That's what I'm thinking. Do you share that, or you see something?
yeah, absolutely. So Barry is bringing a midrash, which, for those of us that were here last week, we have a better
Rashi commentary.
midrash. Where in the Torah it says that the Israelites sang this song of rejoicing after they crossed the Sea of Reeds. And that's where the prerequisite comes from. It's Exodus 15. And in the Midrash, the rabbis imagine that the angels are also singing a song to God that the Egyptians have drowned. And God says, stop singing, my creation is drowning. And when we do the 10 plagues at the Passover Seder, we take out a drop from our cup, from the second cup of grape juice or wine, because a full cup symbolizes a full cup of happiness, and we are reducing our happiness at the suffering of others. So that is,
Dave,
yeah, go ahead.
I guess I'm curious about the quantitative level of this. Last week, when Texas beat Arizona in the World Series, should they not have been happy and exulting their win?
Right on point, Eric.
I mean,
Yes,
what is the quantitative level of this exultation?
I think it's you can be happy that you won and recognize the humanity of the other side.
Yeah, you don't have to gloat.
So just like it says in Leviticus, love your neighbor as yourself, and Hillel says, Hillel being a rabbi who lived around the year 1, says that he summarizes the Torah by saying, what you don't want people to do to you, don't do to others. So if you had been on the losing side of the World Series, how would you want the other fans to respond to you? So something like, good game. Or if you're not actually playing, like your team played, like put up a good fight or something like that. Like you're already feeling bad, don't rub it in. So yes, that's an excellent question and example of like, how is this relevant to our lives today?
May I suggest a different reading of this, which I think is straightforward?
Please.
Excuse me. Because this is not what would strike us, I think, as a very high-minded piece of advice. It's more of a kind of a game playing, and in game theory, you want to not exult and don't rejoice because you want to maximize the the chance of divine wrath to your enemy. That's not a very pretty thing, perhaps, but that's what it seems to say. Somehow you're supposed to double think it. You don't want the Lord to be displeased with you, but with the other guy. Now maybe I have that wrong, but I don't, and it's true. It comes from Proverbs, but Proverbs is full of sort of calculation, advice. Now it can be read a different way, but that's the way it strikes me. You're trying to set it up so to suppress your own gloating, as was said, in order for the divine wrath not to be diverted to you, averted to you.
Well, the divine wrath from them.
That's interesting. I was wondering, wouldn't that, if we take that line of thinking though, if that's perhaps what is implied with this verse, wouldn't that still in and of itself be good to some extent? I mean, according to God's justice, or wouldn't that wrath be just anyways?
That's really interesting. It seems to me that it isn't in our hands to maximize or to place the divine wrath one place or another. But that's the way the Proverbs writer sees it.
Perhaps the writer might believe that we're having some sort of meaningful interaction with God in that sense, in the sense that, like, not that we could cause God to do something, but that things we might do might cause God to respond in some way to us. Maybe could be part of it. That's what I was thinking.
If Proverbs is Mishle, I think that's Shlomo HaMelech who wrote that. But I have a different spin for you, Phil, and ladies and gentlemen. That I read commentary that the Egyptians at the time we were coming out of the land of Egypt from the slavery under Pharaoh were oppressors, no question about it. But they weren't always. And God, because God is infinite on both ends of the spectrum, God has always the hindsight, and the foresight, and the current sight to see the whole picture. God remembers constantly not only the bad of the Egyptians toward us, but the good of the Egyptians when Yaakov Avinu and Yosef Hatzadik, in reverse order in terms of chronological arrival in Egypt, came to Egypt, and the Egyptians were our gracious hosts. So God remembers when Egypt was not so nasty to us. And there's commentary to that along the way, which is why Egypt is not, commentary tells us that Egypt is not so hated. We just don't want to go back there because that's slavery, but at the last of our Exodus. But before that, we were at one time we were the guests of the gracious hosts. So God sees all this stuff.
So if your enemy is defeated, are you supposed to say Kaddish instead of rejoicing?
Doesn't say that. Just don't exalt. And I'm reading it when it says avert the divine wrath from them. What if they have a more extreme reaction and they try and recover or punish you more because you, or just get angry with you because you see they're tripping, or they're losing something, or they made a mistake, and they psychologically, some folks are just going to want to strike out whoever is laughing at them or happy that they're suffering. I mean, that to me sounds like very practical advice. Sometimes, someone told me once, I took that to heart, don't stir up the hornet's nest. You might get you get these folks angry, and they may be working against you, but they have a certain amount of pride as well. And sometimes it's better just to let things be, maneuver around the situation without even them, and knowing that you may have gained the upper hand on them, just move on instead of coming back and trying to seek some sort of retribution or just say, well, I'll show these guys. They can't get the best there. They can't. They're laughing at me. That can't be. I'll show them who's who. No. That's how I see that.
In today's world, does it take away the, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. Someone else talking. In today's world, what things have evolved to, seems, would it, if you're not supposed to, without gloating, does it take away the impetus to try to win or to try to achieve if you aren't going to be able to, in a contest, if you win and are told not to be happy about it, or happier than your friends feel bad.
I think it just means, at least the way I took it, was that you shouldn't take or enjoy in your victories in a very spiteful way. You know, you can take your victories, I think, without it having to be for the sake of the loss of somebody else. It could just be good in and of its own sake. A victory could be good because it is a victory. It doesn't have to be necessarily because the other person failed.
Lost, yeah.
Perhaps.
You're
And
right.
I think you could still have that in modernity. That's the way that I took it, at least, though.
I think you're exactly right.
So it would seem to me, under those conditions, that once the Israelites crossed the Red Sea and got out, that should have been sufficient without destroying the Egyptian army. But the Egyptian army was destroyed. So wasn't that going overboard?
No.
It's hard to talk about this knowing what's going on now.
I don't think it was necessarily a bad choice, especially since the Egyptians are seen as pursuing them into the sea. So they, in a sense, they could have brought it upon themselves, or at least their commanders could have, by refusing to acknowledge the little mercies that may have been extended to them. That's the way I thought about it.
I'm thinking of plain language in the Torah at that point, that God hardens the hearts of Pharaoh and his army and his horse and their horses, that all have one heart, because God wants to be exalted and glorified. I forgot the word I wanted to say, but God wants to be, exalted at the sea, at the expense of the Egyptians at that point. That he's glorified. God wants to be glorified by the defeat of the Egyptians, that they should know that God is doing this. And so if God is hardening their hearts, it implies that they don't have free will anymore. I know there's contradictory arguments for that, but it seems to me that that's a possibility, that they don't have their own minds. It could be argued that they had that mind, and that's why God hardened their hearts to do it. But I'm pretty sure that the language is clear that God hardened their hearts. And so the question is, did they act on their own, or was this God's show to be glorified?
My question is, with everything that's going on right now, there's good and bad on both sides. There's there are good people on the Palestinian side who don't want this to happen. So does that mean that God is hardening their heart too with the ones that are being the terrorists?
I'm willing to go on record and on YouTube as saying that this is not a direct parallel between the situation in the Bible in Egypt and what's going on now. I don't know that God is trying to work things so that God is glorified right now. However, I do think that this text does have direct implications for the situation going on in the Middle East right now. And I will put that ball down in case somebody wants to pick it up and run with it, or you can go in another direction.
I don't think God's trying to glorify himself, but I think we can take a message from this that we want Israel to win, but that doesn't mean we should rejoice in seeing even Hamas, as silly as that sounds, seeing them, fail, because they're still God's creation. And a lot of these people are brainwashed and they don't even realize what they're doing.
Hmm.
Well, it's very hard to respond to that interesting comment without ripping things open in a way that I think actually we ought to do, and have rational discussions about what makes sense and how many children you want to slaughter and so on. But I'm not going to get into that because I was told politics didn't enter into these classes. I think that's pretty impossible, and I appreciate David raising the question and carefully raising it in a totally ambiguous way.
I'm going to go back and make something very simplistic and say that this paragraph is just plain old good sportsmanship. I think it's a lesson that we can all learn, and that we have our life given to us by the divine, and we owe it to him, her, to be good people. And so, you go out and you try to win, but you also try to be a good sport. Because that's how I see it. Just do the right thing.
If I said something inappropriate, I apologize. But I'm saying, what we're learning right now, it relates to our everyday lives as well. So I think maybe that's why we're bringing that up, because everything that happens in the Torah, and this is a learning situation for us as Jewish people too. Maybe we did something wrong that we're being punished for something. I was referring to yes, we want to be defeated. God will, we will defeat Hamas. But this is a learning experience for all of us, and how we should, be with one another, how we act with one another. This is very relevant to us right now, as what we're learning in Pirkei Avot. So I mean, that's what I think.
Thank you. Comment in the chat. So comment in the chat. I think this paragraph means that one should take care of his or her own side of the street, that we let God take care of the bigger picture. So I'm going to extend that, and Sam, you can tell me if I'm misrepresenting where I think you're going with this, that a general idea is that you can control your own actions, you can't control the actions of others. And so you can't necessarily control what happens to you, but you can control how you think about it, you can control how you react. And so perhaps if you do your part to lower the tensions a little bit and recognize the humanity of the other World Series fans or whoever else is on the other side from you in a situation, then that can mean you're doing your part to make the world better. It's interesting. I remember as a kid being in gym class and playing like a basketball scrimmage or something, and then being told to line up and shake hands with the other team. And it feels like this text, although I'm fairly certain my gym teacher had never read Pirkei Avot, that this text seems to support that sort of line of thinking. That, you know, everybody is a part of it. Okay, so I'm going to end this class now with the recording a few minutes early.